What's going on, everybody? Today is August 13th, 2024. This is the Daily AI Show. You're watching and listen to us live as we do every weekday. And today we are talking about the cost of using LLMs and how that is quickly racing, or is it racing to zero? So we have a lot to talk about on this one, a lot of kind of cool concepts. And with us, we almost have a full house. We have Junmi, Beth, Carl, Andy, and I'm Brian. And we are going to do our best today to deep dive into this topic. So this was actually one of my ideas. I mean, so at the back end of this for our audience is, we all come up with ideas and topics and, which ones end up making shows and stuff like that. And the genesis for this idea for this show topic was really something that Rachel Woods, the head of the AI Exchange, it's somebody that we all love, and we talk about it quite often because it's how we all ended up meeting, was a Slack community called the AI Exchange that she put together. She was also quite literally the first person I saw on TikTok that was talking just daily and intelligently about AI, and just really captured my imagination way back. She started that, I think, 1 month before GPT 3.5 went out. So she was on the cusp of it for sure. So anyway, she has talked about this idea of the cost going, racing towards zero, if you will. So we want to unpack that a little bit and have a good conversation about it. Because what does that mean? Like, okay, it's racing to zero. Does that mean, okay, does that mean all API costs are going to go to zero? Well, no, probably not. But we also have seen drastic cuts in API costs for some of the largest models. We've seen OpenAI do this over and over and over again. Google over and over and over again. Claude the same, where previously it cost X amount of cents per tokens and so on and so forth, the way the API models are priced out. And that oftentimes gets halved and sometimes quartered, within months of a new model coming out. And so what you end up having is, 4.0 for Omni being cheaper than what, let's say, 3.5 was just 6 months ago, or something like that. But what does that mean for businesses? What does that mean as the cost goes down? What does that unlock for businesses who are thinking about how to run these API calls? Because a lot of people will tell you, and this is where I'd love to get you guys knowledge on this, is what I see is a lot of businesses saying, like, despite how great GPTs, LLMs are and what they can do for business, they actually are still pretty slow. And so, and they're costly still, right? They're still costly to get what you get out of them. It's not that they don't have a positive impact, but if you were going to build future agentic systems for a business, if you were going to try to actually replace a human with X amount of work done by an LLM, what does that cost have to be? What does the latency have to be? How good does it have to be? Is it all about that cost and that digit, or is there more to it? And that's really what ignited my idea about this. Like, what does it mean when we say these costs are racing towards zero? So I would love to open it up with that sort of thought process with anybody who has something to add to that. What you got?
Well, I can run through what the multiple factors are that are influencing API inference pricing, which is really what we're talking about here. The first is model optimization, and you basically alluded to this, Brian, in that, these major players that are providing the frontier models also have a whole suite of smaller models that are there, and or older models that were perfectly sufficient for various applications before, but have now been superseded by a more recent model. So that more recent model gets to the certain pricing on the API, and they drop the price of the older model, but you can still use it. So model optimization, has all these factors improving the efficiency of that, the cost efficiency of operating these models. One is pruning. Once you build a model, you can prune out all the things that, otherwise take compute cost and reduce the overall cost of running that model. Quantization is one of the factors that is used here. That is, if you are doing the math inside the model to 5 digits of precision, now just drop it to 2 digits precision. It does effectively the same thing, but with a very much reduced compute cost. Fine tuning has improved models, and importantly, the combination of those things has created smaller models that take less compute, that can do the same kind of thing, And that's why you see these minis coming out that are very inexpensive. But, it's like the 80-20 rule. They get 80% of the performance at 20% of the price. Okay. Another one is that now as we're moving forward, we're using pre-trained models for new model development. So the investment cost for developing a new, more capable model is declining. Advancing algorithms, right? Faster execution, reducing the weight of matrix multiplication in that. And I forget what we did a show on some technique for reducing matrix multiplication costs in inference. And all of this is reducing the lower energy consumption when they're doing the inference, which reduces their cost, which allows them to bring the price to you down to the API. You've got specialized chips, TPUs from Google that are being used by Apple and others to do this, tensor processing units, that's called. The language processing unit, which is instead of being a GPU, which is a matrix multiplying kind of thing, Grok uses a language processing unit architecture, which is a tensor processing unit as well, but it's focused on natural language processing, which is the stuff of LLMs. So it ends up being much faster, and that chip is capable of doing this in a more efficient way. Another major factor is open source models. Open source is free to use. So a company can take an open source model and apply it without any cost of inference if they can run it locally. All they have to do is make an upfront investment for the hardware or just rent space on Amazon Web Services or on Google Cloud to run their own open source models. And so that's pushing prices down, especially because as we discussed on a prior show, you can take open source models and merge those models to achieve increasing capabilities without a whole bunch of training cost. And there you can build a kind of a whole suite of open source combinations in a single model and run inference that way. One of the main things that's happening here also is just market competition. So, this is a land grab for all of the LLM providers. Everybody's trying to get people to work on their platform. And so what's the best way to do that? Well, make your opening pricing below your costs so that you can grab market share. So there's a market share grab that's underway here. And also it's important, in order for people to start adopting AI, for there to be a relationship between the cost that's being required by the LLM providers and the value being derived by the companies that are using them. And that's the ROI demand. But, there's been a lot of chatter over the last couple of months about, hey, this AI thing is a bust. There's really no value in this thing that's being delivered. But McKinsey, Accenture, and others are basically refuting that with data and with the enterprise's actual delivery of hard and soft ROIs, like time savings in their organization, productivity increases, employee satisfaction, brand enhancement, and ultimately customer satisfaction. Think about it on the customer support side. I'm going to be much happier working with an AI than waiting on the phone with for a human who doesn't fully understand their system even. Anyway, that's kind of where I see all the factors that are, reducing inference pricing. But I think it'll never go to zero. Think about email. It used to be that email was free. I now pay a lot for email because I have to buy Google, Workplace to get my Gmail, and it's minimally $8 a month. And then I have to, as my email, volume and file attachments grows, I've got to buy storage for that email. And so, that's again the opening gambit for all these companies is to grab market share, get you locked on their platform, and they'll raise the price in the future.
So, well, I would say, first of all, when you mentioned about customer service, as somebody who's struggling with American Airlines right now, I will gladly take a solid AI solution over what I'm having to deal with. So yes to that. I think there's a lot of customer service that can be solved with really, really intelligent AI customer solutions. So yeah, just on that point, You really uncovered a lot there, Andy. And I think you bring up a couple points, and I wanted to bring up this banner really quick, which is just to say, because of a lot of what you talked about, we did talk about on this show and on episode 229, where we broke down Leopold Asherbrenner's situational awareness paper. First of all, if you haven't, you should go read that paper. It's long, but you'll enjoy it. It'll take you a little bit to get through it. But a lot of what Andy just went over, at least a couple of those areas, Leopold brings up in his situational awareness paper, talking about how the cost is affected and how these model improvements factor into that. So I just wanted to bring that up as well. But let me jump in and throw it out to everybody else. I just want to make those quick 2 points. What is everybody else thinking?
So I think one of the things that's true that we talk about often is when you watch or listen to the people who are in the situation, who are developing it, they're also saying that it's racing to zero, right? So people from OpenAI, and it's not model specific, right? So people from OpenAI are talking about wrappers and like, hey, so you need to understand, if you're going to build on our system, this is what we see as capabilities in the future, and this is what we see as costs. Same for Google. I'm not sure that I've seen Anthropic talk about it, but Anthropic tends to release and like just do great things and let other people talk about them, right? Kind of like Mistral. So and Anthropic's inference has also dropped. So I think it's not just that this is something that people are talking about, but also something that people are acting on. And what it means is that it's cheaper to experiment. One of the things that one of the conversations that I've been having with some colleagues and clients is what this offers is the ability to do just in time, like app fixes, mini app fix, tiny little thing, kind of like a custom GPT, where if you want something to get done, you can do it now for less than it would cost if you build it, right? That's going to cost you something, but time. But you can now build something that will solve your problem personally, and there's an ROI in that because it's so fast and it's so inexpensive.
Yeah, 1,000% on that. I know. I mean, we've done it. We've done it live, not necessarily on this show, but we've had internal conversations where it's been faster for me to live build a custom GPT to solve the problem than it would be to work through the problem itself on my own. And that's happened several times where I can actually build and deploy something faster than we could think through the entire process. And that's what I think a lot of businesses are going to start thinking about is this, that's not an agent, right? But that's me saying, hey, I don't need to do this. I'm going to keep my conversation going this direction with other humans where we're going to be creatively thinking. And that may not be, the reasoning and stuff. It may not be exactly where AI is going to be helpful. But if it can help me streamline this process over here concurrently while I'm working on this process, that starts to feel very much like having, that AI intern or that other AI coworker. And I want to bring up something that I just saw. This kind of something I would bring up on tomorrow's show. So maybe we'll bring it up again. But this is from the rundown. The Rundown AI. I want to make sure I'm saying it right. The newsletter. And they were talking about Sakana AI, and they've revealed an autonomous AI scientist. Now, I just want to bring some of the details out on this because I think it plays into this conversation. And Carl and Jimmy, I'd love to get your thoughts on this too. But really quick, Sakana is saying they're introducing the AI scientist, the world's first AI system capable of autonomously conducting scientific research, potentially revolutionary. So what it's saying is that it can generate new research ideas, write code, run experiments, writes papers, and performs its own peer review with near human accuracy. And roughly that's costing about $15 to produce. And then they're saying that it's already contributed with novel contributions in machine learning domains like language modeling and diffusion models. So not scientific, but if we just take that same concept and apply it to a business solution or maximizing, ROI, they're to me, this is the same story, which is to say building these companies are going to build these internal systems, or there's going to be, you know, the Cassidys of the world or other ones that help you build and very quickly deploy this as a work, you know, a work stream, because a lot of the building blocks are the same per business. You know, not everybody's a unique case, where this is going to be very normal very soon. And you can decide what very soon is. But the idea that there will be one or multiple AI agents running on behalf of the company to produce some sort of novel, as they're saying, contribution to that business, not necessarily scientific, just specifically to that business, maybe in marketing, maybe in sales, maybe in financial, legal, maybe in HR, who knows? But the cost, like they're saying $15 to produce, at some point, the latency drops so low, the quality is so high, and the cost is so low that you're going to have businesses saying, yeah, but why aren't we running this 24/7? Why would we ever turn this off? And I think that is really interesting to me, when the cost is such and the results are so good, that the idea of going and doing is not really the same. It's really, these just run. These are now part of our business model, and these models run continuously, and they evaluate our data, and they're looking for new ways and innovative ways for our business to get a competitive advantage. So anyway, I just want to bring that up because I thought that was really cool to read. And then I just think, yeah, okay, scientific's great, but I think every business is going to have one of these in the near future.
Absolutely. And remember, these are from, or this is from the folks that created the evolutionary model merge, right? So having a model or creating a model on the cheap but that have all of these capabilities, or this wide variety of capabilities, makes sense when you can simply Lego brick the pieces of the capabilities that you need together to have this high performing model, right? And I think it's interesting the way that was framed, as in that they have a singular persona, right? This fills AI scientist role. Okay, so just imagine every other role that you can build that persona or build that entity, if you will, to fulfill that role, right? Whether it be business analysis, or whether it be engineering, or any of those kinds of roles. And I think that kind of touches upon what this race to zero is really going to impact on the social side, is with this model optimization, with your ability to build a worker that can run 24/7, you're going to have a less financial need to have that filled by a person, right? Or just less people, because you just need less people to run more of these AI agents. So that's a factor that we have to analyze in how is that going to affect the overall job market and things like that. But I do appreciate that one of the big things that this overall foundational model usage costs that go down, like Gemini just announced a few days ago, or Google announced Gemini Flash 1.5 went down 78% for input tokens and 71% for output tokens. That's a huge price cut. So I think we have an opportunity here for businesses to take advantage of, like you said, Brian, running 24/7. This is similar to the same kind of thinking for cloud computing, right? One of the reasons why you would back up your data to the cloud was because it costs something like 3/10,000th of a cent per hour to keep, a gig of data in the cloud, in cold storage. So yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's cheaper than buying a whole new set of hard drives, for a server farm or whatnot every 5 years anyways. So the ROI on that makes sense. And I think that's what we're reaching, is that point where the ROI just makes sense to run these applications, run these services at that time of inference. Like we've talked about the concept of websites will be hyper personalized and built the moment you click on the link or put in the URL to load up the page, right? The website doesn't need to be pre-built. It can be built completely and personalized to you because it knows that you're coming to see this data or you've asked it from another link. So it's all about the now and all about being readily available 24/7. It's the 7-Eleven of AI, really.
That's a show title right there. It's the 7-Eleven of AI. I love that.
I think I want to go into where for us, like whenever we do any discovery presentations and whenever we talk to any of our clients, we really like one of the first things we tell them to do is, hey, you should really have some sort of business copilot. And we're not talking about buying Microsoft Copilot. We're talking about, hey, building your own kind of AI advisor for your specifically for your business that sees everything through the lens of your business, through whether it's using custom GPTs or using Claude projects, which we've just run with another client, and just, hey, take your knowledge base, take a whole bunch of things that would apply to your business, put it in the knowledge base, put your mission, your vision, your values, your goals, your target audience, even your brand, and then also add in a whole bunch of your product, your business templates, whether it's evaluation metrics, a matrix, your project proposals, employee handbooks, whatever it is. So then you can also not just ask it advice, but ask it to produce things in the same vein as, I don't know, a risk assessment or your project proposal. So the one that we usually demo is a fake construction company, and we've loaded, company profiles. We've loaded the Calgary building codes and regulation overview, financial planning into it. So you can, and then we have like a predetermined set of questions to show the business, like, hey, you should be able to answer these questions that your business normally answers on a regular basis whenever you get new clients or get however your business operates. That would be something that you should use, which then leads to, hey, could we do one for this and this and this? And it's like, yes, you can do one for each division or area. And as our AIs get smarter, your Copilot gets smarter along with you, to the point where, yeah, it could definitely act as an employee. For us, like a lot of our administration, a lot of different things that we would have had to pay someone to do, we're using AI to do it. Hence the cost of that significantly decreases our business costs. And it's actually cheap to do it. Now, when we build custom AI, whether it's something simple as a digital assistant or more complex, that's when we love the pricing decreases from Anthropic, OpenAI, or Gemini, because it's like, hey, this is even cheaper now. And how we distribute the costs back to the client. But it, yeah, to cents per million tokens, half cents to million tokens. I don't even know how low it can possibly go, but it's always nice. And it's nice, especially if your client has, they have high touch, high use AIs, like a external digital assistant that gets touched by 100, 200 people per day and more.
Yeah, and I think your point just brings me back to what Beth said too, which is the idea of it's getting cheap enough that you can just play without being cost prohibitive to a company. Just think about what that does. If you like, how many people work at we'll say a small medium enterprise, so 1,000 people or less. How many people of that 1,000 people probably have phenomenal ideas, but because of their job and their role and staying in their lane and 1,000 other reasons, there's not really a cost-effective way for them to test new ideas. We've always heard this idea back in the day of Google and how they had to devote 10% of their time to just new ideas. And we've heard stories about Google and how they used to throw parties. I don't know if they still do, when things would fail, because that was a celebration of, you've reached the end. You've reached the end of this. And even though it failed, or we're celebrating the idea that we've reached like the no turning back, point. of it. So I love this idea, what you're saying, Carl, and both what you're saying, Beth, because Beth, you always bring up the idea of brainstorming and stuff, but just this idea of it being so cost effective for a company that they literally say, open the gates. There's no downside for you having good ideas and running it up the chain. But running up the chain used to mean you had to get people to support your idea. Usually you're going to have to get a champion above you. You're going to fight to get into a room where you can talk for 30 seconds to a group of people sitting around a table that you have this idea. And that's if it even gets there, because it's very tough to go from a low-level job all the way up through the ranks. And, we see the success stories, but there's so many where it just never makes it because there's no champion there. Now take the idea of this person with the right tools can not only run their idea up the flagpole, they can do it like Sakana's talking about, where they might have a resource to fully vet out and run multiple models and reasoning on whether something like that might work for the company. And then they have a way to package that very easily to then send it up the up the chain, up the flagpole, wherever you want to say it. Like, that's amazing. And not all businesses are going to take advantage of that, but holy moly, I hope businesses are thinking about this, about the idea of opening up the floodgates and allowing your employees to be the true experts that they probably are, because so much of our jobs still today are repetitive tasks that don't really use the full value of what we've been employed for, what we're being hired for. It's these tasks. And as they get more and more taken over by AI, I really see not less people being employed, but actually more people employed, but just in a different way, which is to do the creative thinking, the critical thinking. And AI is going to get better there too, with the reasoning and agents and all that. But we're still going to need people who have really innovative ideas, who truly understand the industry. I talked to people the other day at a company, and they were giving me their background really quick as we were doing a quick intro on the call. And I'm building a tool for them. I'm building a custom GPT for them. I have built one, and we were talking about it. And it was like, I have 20 years with the company. I have 15 years with the company in sales. I have 17 years with, there was nobody less than 10 on this call. And you just think about the volume, the value of that knowledge, and then giving them a tool and saying, go see what you can do that's new and innovative, and run it up the chain. Anyway, it gets me very excited, because I just think the best companies in the future are going to be doing this non-stop, and it's going to be so cost effective that there'd be no reason not to do it.
So Brian, one of the things that we do for our clients is, especially with employees who are close to retiring, who want to pass on that knowledge, but because of how their business operates or what industry they're in, everything's in here, right? There was no, I've typed something out, I've had this process, it's usually up here. So what we do is we're like, hey, why don't we just sit down a couple hours, we're going to record everything that you say, we're going to ask you these questions to trigger, prompt a bunch of like things that you want to know, or whatever the thing in the business, because I usually use AI to ask, hey, what questions should we ask this person if we want to extract maximum knowledge from this person? And then we turn that and use the recording as the data set for whatever system we're using, most likely a custom GPT or a project or really anything. In that way, it leverages somebody who may have left and doesn't have, and the company relies on, for example, we have one who the pricing of certain projects, how proposals are run is all up in the person's mind. Like, that person's been doing it for 20 years. There is no system, there is no reference guide, there's nothing. So it was, it was lucky. They said it was lucky that we can now do this so that we can contain that. I don't know, in the future, it's like, well, we'll just clone this guy, feed them his knowledge, and he'll be an employee forever, which actually just opens up a whole scary set of doors.
But look, I think you make a good point, Carl. And you immediately make me think of my own father. He did consulting work after, but he initially retired in 2005. And I mentioned this before. When he retired, he was a vice president at Delta Airlines. 30 plus years in aviation, worked his way up from blue collar to white collar. I've talked that story before. The reason I bring it up though is exactly your point. My dad wasn't in a position where he was concerned with like, ooh, if I give you this, you're going to replace me. My dad was retiring, and nothing would have given him more joy and satisfaction than to sit down with you, Carl, in 2005 and say, yes, let me tell you what I know, what would be valuable. Now, it would be totally up to Delta to whether they decided to use that or not in the future. And that's, you can't control that. But just thinking about my dad and how much pride he had in his work, and there, you can multiply this by millions of people who feel this way. They're just naturally getting to the end of their career. They're not concerned about being replaced. They're moving on to other things or whatever, but they would love to impart their knowledge to the next generation or whatever. And so I love this idea. It's yet again another, you're doing it, but I think it's one of these $1 million business ideas, because there are so many businesses that are dealing with this right now and would love an opportunity to preserve that knowledge in some way. I don't know if you want to talk on this, Andy, because I'm sorry, Jimmy, but I was just gonna say, Andy, because you actually have been in a position, I think, similar to this with like maybe Life Aid and Fit Aid and stuff like that. So I don't know if you had an opportunity to pass on your knowledge or if there was a book of Andy after you left, but I know you've talked about preserving your knowledge in other ways too. So I can see this being something you would have really, really grabbed onto.
Well, the idea of capturing what I know and what I've learned in the specific context of, what advice I could provide to the people who follow me in the role or in, like think about the transition. When I left as the chief operating officer, it had those responsibilities had to be kind of parceled out to multiple other people because this was a reduction of total staff count. And so I wasn't available going forward. It's a little awkward for people once, you've been removed from a company for that reason, for them to reach out to you and say, hey, well, can you help me out with this thing? But imagine if in the course of my being able to interact, say through Slack, I had, when something occurred to me that was useful, I would give that to an AI that's going to organize that and record it into a taxonomy of different areas of the company that, here's some tips and tricks that you ought to know if you're working on procurement, right? That kind of thing. I don't even know that if I sat down today, I could recreate the knowledge that I gained over the course of 8 years full time with Life Aid. But if in the course of my doing the work, I had access to an AI where I could just speak to the AI and say, hey, here's an idea that I think it will be useful to people in the future. And that was being organized. I think that's $1 million idea because corporate knowledge, it's important to retain it. There aren't really very effective systems for doing so.
Okay.
Go for it.
All great ideas. I love it. I think a business should invest in their institutional memory. It's the hardest thing to keep a hold of and build because everybody hates building documentation. Just, let's let that lie. But why don't we twist this idea a little bit? This is a great argument of why you would create a AI avatar of yourself. All of your knowledge, all of your experience. So like Brian, if your dad had done this for himself, now he rents out his AI avatar or employs them at various businesses, and he gets paid for his knowledge and experience that he's built up to this point because it's his avatar. It's his data. He has that inherent right, or we will create this right to have control of it. And then now you can have all of these really expert versions of yourself working for all of these other companies.
You can combine them too. Like when my dad retired, he went into consulting. Who hired him? Other people he had worked with at Delta previously, in different roles and whatever. Like it's a small world. When I was over in Iraq, everybody I knew, all of a sudden, if you started asking questions, they all knew each other from the former Air Force. All of them. Like in firefighting, you're like, wait a minute, you know that? Oh yeah, no, we used to work together 20 years ago. You're like, wait a minute. And you all of a sudden realize it's a small world,
Right.
So not only my dad's, excuse me, not only my dad's, but him and his 3 or 4 or 5 other buddies who are all working. Now they're like, yeah, this is our new consulting. And yes, we're still going to be present as a human, but we've also got this mega brain that we can lean on at any time to go, what was that? Oh, there it is, because I've been building this over the last 30 years of my career. So I love that. I love that idea.
Yeah. This phrase over the last 30 years is key here, because if you ask me now to try to recreate the knowledge that I had over the course of that time, that's just too big a project. There's no way that I could even remember most of that stuff. I would have to have a very sophisticated set of prompts to my own neural network to try to elicit some of that stuff out of there. But if it could be done progressively in the course of your conduct of the role, and over the course of your career, it's like Facebook is accumulating a lot of things about each person who's been using it since it began. Organizing all of those things, or let's say somebody who's a blogger or who's been doing TikToks, there you've got a little richer collection about which you can then create an avatar. But I'm fearful that for most people, this gets lost to the ether. So it has to be done progressively. That's my point. I love your idea, but doing it now in retrospect is bad. It's not going to work.
Hypothetically, Andy, you could, let's say, talk about a topic like AI daily for like 45 minutes over the course of several years. And that would be at the time of idea. I don't know if anybody's done that, but they should, because I think having daily conversations about these topics is a great way to build a knowledge base for the future. I don't know. What do you think, Jimmy?
I think I'm with you, Brian. I think that's $1 million. That's $1 billion idea.
$1 million idea. I love it. We've gone up. It's $1 billion.
How many conversations would you really need? Like 267 of them to really form a solid, cohesive, AI persona about it.
267-ish. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Andy, with all joking aside, Andy, you mentioned it before, but this happens to me all the time where I go, I'm pretty sure we've talked about this, but do I remember it? Can I recall it verbatim for what I did for the research that day? No, it's like kind of long gone. And I am also relying on past episodes. I have definitely looked back at our own past episodes to get me caught up to talk about another topic. Situational awareness today would be a great example of that.
I ran into this on this show. I was thinking in our conversation earlier about, the way that, AI could possibly organize an ROI for you as a company by going in and analyzing your entire system stack and conceiving, designing, and implementing a revision of that stack to incorporate the latest and greatest models and tools and systems, and even write new code to do the integrations and all that. Well, on a recent show, it might have been a news show last week or the week before, I mentioned a company that I'd stumbled upon that does exactly that and announced it. And it came through one of the newsletters. I spent 5 minutes while you guys were talking trying to find what that was. What I want all of those prior conversations to be put into a single repository that we can then talk to an AI and just ask the question, hey, I mentioned this, in the last couple of weeks, go through those things and tell me what the name of that company was that I mentioned. I'll never otherwise be able to find it. That's the $1 million idea for a talk show like this that has a huge corpus of information and no way to go back and retrieve it.
It's not that there's no way. And that is actually, that's in the works. But one of the things that happens when you're a daily AI show that talks for 45 minutes every day, we need Google to come out with the 10 million context window because we are just slightly above the 2 million context window, which is the biggest. The other thing that I just want to toss in tiny in this, because I know we're going to wrap up. I want you to understand that everything that we've talked about is passive, right? So we're going to the AI and saying, hey, can you give me this information? If it's running 24 hours, if it has access to everything that you are doing, what happens when the AI sends you an email and says, in the middle of the show, about minute 34, there was a really great idea. It relates to this note that you just took. And in our team, I know that Carl is also making notes about that in the stuff that we have access to as a group, right? Like what happens when AI becomes that connector?
Mhm.
I love it.
Teammate.
not passive, but
You
real
need
good.
that teammate.
Yeah.
A teammate that everybody talks to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll throw it up there because this would be a question I'd ask anybody that's in the chat, which is not necessarily subscription, although thank you, Jen. And then Cisco saying the same thing, I'd pay also. So yeah, listen, it's something we definitely want to do. Beth has talked about it and we have looked into it. I know we're kind of joking about it and being facetious, but it 45 minutes a show or 30 to 45, let's say, times 237. Like we've already maxed out some of these knowledge areas, and so like we just need to keep looking for new ways to do that. But we'll absolutely solve this problem, and there will be an easy way to get really detailed information from any of our shows. We will use it internally, no doubt, but I also think it would be super cool to turn that out to our growing audience, because you guys aren't listening to every single show. I miss a couple shows here or there. There's always something that you want to pull back up. And it's also really important to be able to go back in time and say, where were we 6-9 months ago? And then be able to reference that against where we are today. And that's very easy because we're always talking about whatever the latest and greatest is in real time. But of course, whatever came out 6-9 months ago is not relevant necessarily today. It's part of the story and the journey. So this has all been great. I think it's been a fantastic conversation on this, and we'll keep talking about this, about the costs and what that means for business. And what it means is businesses start to say, hey, there's really zero downside from a financial standpoint to start deploying these AI solutions. Hopefully a lot of them already have. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about the news. Sakana may come up again. There's also a lot of other news. No big announcements today in terms of the strawberry thing that I'm aware of just yet, although Carl's got, I don't know, Carl, no?
Well, I think like there's a bunch of buzz at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and apparently there's a model running around, but we don't know.
We'll hit it tomorrow.
We'll see. We'll hit that tomorrow if that's the biggest
perfect
thing.
timing. And then on Thursday, we're going to be talking about, we've been talking a little bit about small and medium enterprises and that, sort of 1,000 employee company, because it's just such an important area of business. So we're going to be talking about like what is the new business plan. It'll be kind of a jump off point from today's conversation. That's on Thursday. And then Friday, we're going to be looking at Opus Clips. They released a sort of hype video of something called Clip Anything. We do not have access to it. I don't believe anybody does just yet. But there's enough out there, and we want to talk about what that is, because we use Clip Anything, or we use Opus Clip as part of our show production, talking about how we use AI to save time. Opus Clip is a huge part of that. And we want to just talk about what Clip Anything is. I'm sure Jimmy will have a lot to talk about since he's our main guy on that. So lots coming up this week. Like I said, we have tons of topics next week, from talking about robots taking out your recycling to robots getting you to get another to upsell on that Big Mac. So that's going to be a really good one. I saw a cool video about that yesterday, so I'm really excited to talk about that. We're going to be talking about the Pareto problem, which Ethan Mullock recently talked about, and we'll have our 2-week wrap-up video. That's all next week. So lots coming up, and who knows if any of that will pivot or change. So that's it for today, guys. Don't forget to go to thedailyashow.com. Check out our newsletter if you want to get all the background, backstory conversations. That's where you're going to find it. And we will be back tomorrow with whatever the latest news is. So we will see you then, guys. Have a great day. Video. There we go.
Aloha.